For centuries, universities have stood as pillars of knowledge, enlightenment, and progress. They are institutions where critical thought is fostered, and the boundaries of human understanding are pushed ever forward. Yet, the historical record reveals a more complex and often troubling narrative. Even within these esteemed halls, ideas that are now unequivocally condemned once found fertile ground. This includes the development and propagation of theories that underpinned systemic racism. Our focus today is on one such institution, the University of Edinburgh. We will explore its historical entanglement with the creation and dissemination of racist scientific theories. This examination is not about condemnation for its own sake, but about understanding the profound impact of intellectual history. It is a necessary step in confronting the enduring legacies of prejudice. This discussion aims to shed light on a challenging chapter in academic history. It seeks to understand how scientific inquiry, at times, became distorted. We will trace the origins and influence of these harmful ideas. The University of Edinburgh, a beacon of the Scottish Enlightenment, was a vibrant intellectual hub. It attracted brilliant minds and fostered groundbreaking discoveries across many fields. However, within this environment, certain scientific pursuits took a dark turn. During the 18th and 19th centuries, a period marked by intense colonial expansion and the transatlantic slave trade, a pseudo-scientific framework emerged. This framework sought to categorize humanity into distinct races. It then attempted to establish a hierarchy among them. Edinburgh played a significant, albeit regrettable, role in this intellectual movement. Its professors and alumni were instrumental in developing and popularizing theories that provided a supposed scientific basis for racial inequality. These theories were not fringe ideas. They were often integrated into mainstream academic discourse and taught to generations of students. This lent them an air of legitimacy and authority. The university's prestige amplified their reach and influence. The institution's involvement was multifaceted. It encompassed anatomical studies, anthropological theories, and even medical practices. These endeavors often reinforced existing prejudices rather than challenging them. Among the most prominent pseudoscientific theories propagated from Edinburgh was phrenology. This discipline claimed that a person's character and mental faculties could be determined by the shape and size of their skull. While now thoroughly debunked, phrenology was widely studied and taught. Figures like George Combe, though not a university professor, was a prominent phrenologist with strong ties to Edinburgh's intellectual circles. His work, influenced by Edinburgh's anatomical traditions, contributed to racialized interpretations of skull measurements. These interpretations often asserted the intellectual inferiority of non-European peoples. Another significant area was craniometry, the measurement of skulls. This practice was used to prove racial differences in brain size and structure. Robert Knox, a controversial but influential anatomist at Edinburgh, was a key figure in this field. Knox's lectures and writings explicitly promoted racial hierarchies. He argued for inherent biological differences that justified the subjugation of certain groups. His anatomical collections, including human remains, were used to support these discriminatory claims. These theories were not isolated academic exercises. They were deeply intertwined with the prevailing social and political climate. They provided a scientific veneer for the brutal realities of colonialism, slavery, and racial discrimination. The intellectual environment at Edinburgh, with its emphasis on empirical observation, paradoxically lent credibility to these flawed methodologies. The pursuit of knowledge, untempered by ethical considerations, led to deeply damaging conclusions. These conclusions had far-reaching societal consequences. To understand Edinburgh's role, we must situate these developments within their broader historical context. The 18th and 19th centuries were periods of immense scientific discovery and intellectual ferment. However, they were also eras dominated by European imperial expansion. The burgeoning fields of anthropology, anatomy, and natural history often became tools for classification and control. As European powers encountered diverse populations across the globe, there was a perceived need to categorize and understand them. This often led to the creation of racial typologies. These typologies were rarely neutral. They frequently placed European populations at the apex of a supposed racial hierarchy. This intellectual framework served to rationalize conquest, exploitation, and the dehumanization of colonized peoples. Edinburgh, as a leading center of medical and scientific education, was at the forefront of these intellectual currents. Its anatomical schools, renowned for their access to human remains, became sites for comparative studies. These studies often sought to identify physical markers of racial difference. The prevailing scientific paradigms of the time, including early evolutionary theories, were sometimes misinterpreted or deliberately twisted. They were used to support notions of fixed racial types and inherent inequalities. This intellectual climate fostered an environment where racist theories could flourish. The university's connections to the British Empire were also significant. Many of its students and graduates went on to serve in colonial administrations, medicine, and missionary work. They carried these racialized ideas with them, applying them in practice across the globe. Thus, Edinburgh was not merely a passive observer. It was an active participant in shaping the intellectual landscape that underpinned racial prejudice. Its contributions, however regrettable, were integral to the scientific racism of the era. The racist scientific theories propagated from institutions like Edinburgh had profound and devastating consequences. They provided a powerful intellectual justification for systemic discrimination and violence. These ideas were not confined to academic texts. They permeated public discourse, influenced government policies, and shaped societal attitudes. The concept of inherent racial inferiority became deeply embedded in the fabric of Western societies. This had tangible effects on the lives of millions. These theories contributed directly to the dehumanization of non-European peoples. They fueled the transatlantic slave trade, justified colonial atrocities, and underpinned segregationist policies. The notion that certain races were biologically predisposed to savagery or intellectual deficit was widely accepted. This scientific racism provided a convenient alibi for exploitation. It allowed those in power to rationalize their actions as natural or even benevolent. The long-term effects of these ideas are still felt today. They contributed to the formation of racial stereotypes that persist in popular culture and unconscious biases. They shaped institutions, creating systems that continue to disadvantage marginalized communities. The very concept of race as a biological category was largely constructed during this period. The legacy of these theories is evident in health disparities, educational inequalities, and economic disadvantages faced by racialized groups. The idea that race is a biological reality, rather than a social construct, continues to influence public perception and policy. Acknowledging this history is crucial for understanding contemporary issues of racial injustice. It highlights how deeply ingrained these ideas became. The intellectual foundations laid centuries ago continue to cast a long shadow. In recent years, many institutions, including the University of Edinburgh, have begun to confront their historical ties to slavery and racial injustice. This process often involves comprehensive inquiries into their past. These inquiries aim to uncover the full extent of their involvement. Such an inquiry into Edinburgh's history would likely reveal specific instances of academic complicity. It would detail the names of professors, the content of their lectures, and the nature of their research. It would highlight how these activities contributed to racist ideologies. The findings of such an inquiry would likely confirm the significant role played by key figures within the university. It would show how their work, often presented as objective science, actively constructed and reinforced racial hierarchies. The inquiry would also likely expose the institutional mechanisms that allowed these ideas to flourish. This might include the funding of certain research, the acquisition of specific collections, or the curriculum design. The inquiry's conclusions would emphasize the moral and ethical failings inherent in these historical practices. It would underscore the responsibility of academic institutions to critically examine their own past. A key revelation would be the extent to which these theories were not merely academic curiosities. They were actively applied in ways that caused immense suffering and injustice. The inquiry would likely recommend actions for redress and reconciliation. These might include public apologies, educational initiatives, or changes to institutional symbols and names. The significance of such an inquiry lies in its commitment to historical truth. It is a vital step towards accountability and healing. It demonstrates a willingness to grapple with uncomfortable truths. It acknowledges the harm caused by past actions. This process is essential for building a more equitable and just future. The examination of Edinburgh University's historical role in propagating racist scientific theories is not an exercise in condemnation alone. It is a critical opportunity for learning and reflection. Understanding how such ideas gain traction within esteemed academic settings is vital for preventing their resurgence. It underscores the importance of ethical considerations in scientific research. It highlights the dangers of unchecked intellectual curiosity when divorced from humanistic values. Universities, as custodians of knowledge, have a profound responsibility to critically evaluate their own legacies. This involves acknowledging past wrongs and actively working to dismantle their lingering effects. It means fostering an academic environment that is truly inclusive and equitable. It requires a commitment to anti-racist education and research. For students, historians, researchers, and educators, this history offers crucial lessons. It teaches us to be vigilant against the misuse of science. It reminds us that knowledge can be weaponized if not guided by principles of justice and human dignity. For the general public, this narrative provides insight into the deep historical roots of contemporary racial inequalities. It helps us understand that racism is not merely individual prejudice. It is a systemic issue, often bolstered by intellectual frameworks. By confronting this difficult past, we can better understand the present. We can work towards a future where academic institutions truly serve the betterment of all humanity. This ongoing dialogue is essential for fostering a more just and informed society. The legacy of racist science is a stark reminder of the power of ideas. It compels us to critically examine the origins of our knowledge. It challenges us to build a more responsible and equitable intellectual future